how's it going? Anna Sabramowitz here. Hope you're having a fabulous Monday. All right, starting off the week right. How to avoid content dumps. If you've ever created a content dump and you hated it, if you've ever been through a content dump and hated it, or you just want to avoid doing it in the future, you've heard about it and you're like, I don't want to do this, then stick around because I have some tips for you. Because I've done all three. I've been through one. I've been as a learner. I've been through them as a designer, and I think that that's something that you definitely want to avoid in the future. And I'm in that boat. So if you're here, thanks for stopping by. Say hi in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, pop them in the comments. I do go back and check on them, and once in a while I actually answer. Haha. So I'm pretty excited about this because I think that there's a bit of a stirring in a pot happening, and I think this is when I say content dumps, let me just qualify that. Like, what is that? That really is just, and most people who are on the learning side really perceive that. I think the best way, the people who are recipients of our e-learning that are content dumps, is basically it's a digital giant book that is basically put online, and the worst thing is usually these things which are built into these little e-learning modules, they're actually instead of making it easy for us to read as an actual content piece, which is what it is, they're actually spaced into little chunks of content where you have to work hard to make sure you see all the pieces before they allow you to move on to the next page. Have you been a part of that? I've actually been a part of that and designed it. Can you believe that? So it's kind of cool because I just want to do a shout out to my man Alexander Salas, who I just was on talking to earlier today for his show Off the Cuff with ATD. We had a lot of fun. You guys should check out that episode when it comes out. I don't know when he's planning to run it, but Alex, you let me know, okay? I'll spread the word. So one of the things really that you want to do is, when you want to prevent all of this content to be added into the learning module, is what you want to think about is the 20% that's going to add the most value to somebody, right? Because a lot of times you definitely have to share info. Like, let's say you're explaining something or something's pretty important. Like if somebody's just starting a new job, there are certain things they're going to have to read and go through, and also you're going to want to make sure that they've gone through them, right? So an e-learning module will allow you to do that. You can share the info in a cool way. You can also make sure that somebody's been through it and understands it by asking them questions about it, by having situations where they have to apply the content so that you know that they actually get it in context. That's all good. So those are all great and good intentions. And let's say you start your project out and it's working just like that. And then you start showing it to people, right? Because you got to get user feedback, and word spreads, and I've been there. And all of a sudden, all these hands start popping up saying, hey, can we add a thing about this? Can we add this? You didn't cover this. This is a big part of our organization. Can you add this? We got to have this. We got to have our department represented, because people don't. On surveys, it says that people don't know about us. You ever been there? So it's kind of funny. I got to tell you this story a little bit back. I was sitting around a table with a bunch of people. We were looking at the results for call center surveys, and it was about the feedback that we received from customers, or the major complaints that had been coming through. And basically what was happening is, and this is just a really cool thing to do, to be a part of a training focused or a learning focused organization, where they're looking at the results of interactions with customers so they can see where the gaps are. And then if anything, either we would tweak the process to make it better, or improve the way that we explained things, or the way that we trained people. Let's say let's say you're getting a lot of feedback from customers who are, let's say they have to call in 3 or 4 times to get something done. It could be that what they're asking for is maybe not being done, so that's one kind of issue. But sometimes you actually get customers who are asking for things that we don't do, but people don't have the guts or the confidence to tell them that that's not what they do. So they'll, skirt around the issue, or, they'll say, I don't know, whatever, right? So there's different ways to approach that. So you have to look at the problem and say, hey, is this a confidence building thing? Is this a script thing that we could provide if somebody is not confident? What are the things that we can do to help somebody, right? But one of the things that I noticed in that is that when you're looking at this, all these things that could be improved, you could have one really bad complaint, right? And because it's so graphic, or the way that it is, when I say graphic, like really detailed or something, and the person really wrote it well, as in they've got really great dialogue, and they're a good squeaky wheel, we would sometimes be like, oh, look at this complaint. Are we messing up in this area? So basically we would use one complaint to kind of extrapolate from that, like, we're failing in this area. And one of the project managers would be like, hey, guys, let's look at the data, which is the numbers. How many people had this kind of issue? And so that's one of the things that usually happens, I find, is something will grab our attention, or an issue is prevalent in an organization's kind of mind, and they put a lot of emphasis on it because it feels right, and it resonates with people, and it's a good story that spreads, but it isn't actually supported in the data, which means that maybe there's other things that we're not doing well that aren't bubbling up to the surface, or maybe this thing is actually a one-off, and it just spread because it's kind of juicy, but it's not really an issue, and we should be okay letting it go, and we don't have to add information about this thing into the learning, and that happens sometimes. So if that happens, my tip for you is and this goes across the board for all content, kind of when you've decided what the essentials are, everything else has to really justify being there, right? So here's how how something has to justify its presence in your module. Here are some things. And this is not an exhaustive list because we're all learning as we go along, but this will probably get you started. And if you have any good ideas on how to push back for the most relevant content to be supporting the activities that you have in your learning, post it in the comments. I'd love to hear your strategies, because I'm always trying to refine this. But for me, is that the biggest challenge comes from when you're only talking to subject matter experts, because subject matter experts are experts in content, which to me is that they know the policies, they know the details, they know the data, they know how things flow together, but they're not application in the field experts. So a lot of times what will happen is I'll be talking to somebody and they're like, yeah, you got to include this, is very important. It's very important because in the manuals and in the resources, this is a big section. And I'll say, okay, so give me an example of when somebody's using this data. Like, when is somebody going to like come up in a situation where this is actually going to help them solve a problem or help them do something? And a lot of times that's when like the rubber meets the road, and they'll be like, well, I don't have that kind of, practical kind of example for you. And if they don't, that is an indicator to you, either A, you really need to be talking to those practitioners in the field to find out what exactly is it that they are actually using to do the best job in the field. And then number two is, are we including this because it is a part of some sort of a table of contents, versus I only have 30 minutes with these people. What can we give them? What kind of skill set, what kind of aha moments, what kind of epiphanies, what kind of emotional changes, what can we do to promote better behaviors, and then that leads them to maybe that additional content later on when it is actually useful. So the other thing is, like I said, ask for numbers. Like when people are like, oh yeah, this is we are experiencing this problem a lot. I'm like, okay, well, I want to see this problem in context to other problems that we're trying to solve, because based on my analysis and the business goals, we should be focusing here, but you're adding this extra stuff. So I want to know. And I'm not saying no, I'm saying I want to know. So when I'm in the know, I can make better decisions, right? Now, this is a situation that just happened, and I'll finish our video off, where let's say when you're asking for the data, one of the things we always talk about is try and solve an expensive problem, which is important, right? But sometimes this can actually get you in trouble. So you have to qualify what is an expensive problem, because when you're training people to do something, you're like, oh, I'm going to focus on the most expensive problems, and I've actually done that. This is my own boo-boo I'm sharing with you guys. So I'm like, what's the most expensive problem? Like, what are we trying to solve here? And one of the problems that came back, it was big. It was one of those like, $500,000 to $1 million kind of problems. And I was like, my God, that's awesome. Of course we got to solve that problem. So let's come up with scenarios and situations where we're actually solving that problem. And so then I said, okay, after we developed the scenarios, talked to the experts, and I said, okay, so had somebody review it, and they were like, yeah, this is a good one, except, yeah, I think it's only happened like once ever, this problem. And if it ever comes up, it's probably like once a year. So you not only need to work on the how expensive the problem is, but how frequent is this problem? Because there is no way that somebody's going to, in a year, remember how to solve this expensive problem. So we have to think about, okay, so if this is a problem that happens, and you know how big things happen and people are like, oh, we never want that to happen again, that was so bad. But then you think about it's kind of like that airplane thing where it's really safe to fly an airplane. Thousands of them fly every day, every minute probably. But we're all freaked out of flying because when a flight accident happens, it's like so horrific. You think that that's actually like the norm, right? And that's what happens in organizations too. Something bad happens and they'll be like overreact, and then a lot of things are actually attached to it. When if we just focused on behaviors that were like the 20% of the awesome and did those super, super well, then that one-off could be handled in a different way. So imagine if I went back to that place and be like, listen, you guys, so we have this problem that somebody could make a mistake that would cost us $1 million. So what have we put in place for that to not happen? How can we either create processes, procedures, thresholds around that? So that's kind of one strategy, being like, okay, from an operational standpoint. Also, if something is over a certain threshold, can we add a second level of review so that we know that this won't happen again, and before it's approved, somebody else is looking at it. And also, if it is that important and that impactful, then you shouldn't bury that in an e-learning or a module that's kind of, a bunch of other things, and then this $1 million issue. We create a story around that. Something that just makes it stand out and makes it stick into people's minds, so that when in a year, the propensity for them actually remembering that something could go wrong and it's related to this thing. Remember Jim's story and how he woke up and he was just sweating because the company just lost $1 million and his house and his family, he was going to lose his job because he did that. He made that mistake. You got to make it like that powerful. But don't bury it in another module. If it's really that important, make it stand on its own, right? Because we're just adding, the more we add, the more we sometimes dilute. So you want to keep it concentrated, focused, and clear on the right intention, right? So talk to experts in the field, super important. They'll tell you what should go in there. And then everything else has to interview to earn its spot. Ask for the numbers, not just the big, how much is it going to cost? How often do people do this action? Is this something that they do more than once a year or once every 5 years? So the frequency of that action. And then, when you get those errors, how many, is this a single complaint that just gathered everybody's imagination, or is this actually a frequent occurrence? And what are the reasons behind it? So I think those are going to help you get the most important information in, but as I preamble that information has to be pre-framed and contextualized for somebody to actually find value in it. So even if you distill it down to 20%, you still got to make that 20% really relevant to somebody. So I'll talk about that in other episodes. But so far, hopefully you found this helpful. And if you did, give me a thumbs up, share the word, spread the word, share the word too. Because if you do, then that will spread these videos and people will be more, apt to find them. And then that lets me know that you like this kind of stuff and I'll put out more of it. All right. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and I will see you around probably tomorrow. And by the way, tomorrow is another awesome conference happening it is in Australia, but I'm presenting, I believe it is called the Learning While Working conference that Robin Pettert is putting on from Sprout Labs. So check that out. I'll be there also virtually corresponding with my participants. So show up for that. Otherwise, have a fabulous rest of the day, friends. Talk to you later. Bye.